With the new year also comes new prospects for companies and investors alike. AAA Southeast Equities President William Cabangon joins us now in the studio for his insights on the Philippine stock market and the capital markets in 2023. Happy New Year to you, Will.
Happy New Year, Rico. Thanks for having me.
So, let's look at the positives first. The first trading day of the year is tomorrow. What will drive up the markets?
Well, this year, I like to say that this year we're going to see the market up, but with an asterisk.
Okay.
Because last year we saw a lot of issues. Inflation, of course, is top of mind for everybody.
Yeah.
The weak peso, of course, is also top of mind. But add on top of that, the international issues, the war in Ukraine, for instance. I know we're all wrapped up in the holiday cheer right now, but last year's problems are still this year's problems. And those will need to sort themselves out before we start moving higher. But I think what will move our market higher this year, despite all those problems, is that we will finally see the worst behind us. There are signs internationally that inflation is easing, and I largely expect that to trickle in here as well over the next quarter. But
with the aggressive tightening of interest rates, of monetary policy by global central banks, including the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, there is this outlook, Will, that we will experience a recession in 2023. How likely is that?
I think that a recession is the consensus view for Western markets, such as the US and Europe. I think it's quite far-fetched to think that the Philippines will have a recession. After all, I think the Bangko Sentral themselves are projecting a growth of 6%. Now, 6% is very far from negative growth, from a recession. Something would have to go horribly wrong for that to happen. So I don't put that as a very substantial risk.
When you say horribly wrong, there's always a potential. What could that be?
Well, I think the biggest risk in my mind moving into 2023 are energy prices. This is something that the private sector and the public sector have both raised the alarm bells on. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. Obviously, the hike in oil prices to start the year is not the most auspicious way to tackle that issue. But I think moving forward, that's something that all investors should be looking at.
Are you excited about the upcoming initial public offerings, new listings in 2023?
Well, this year, I do hope that we see a lot of new IPOs. I think it will be difficult to drum up much excitement over them, given that last year's IPOs didn't do so well. And with recency and everything, I think most investors will naturally be a bit more cautious. But, Rico, all we need is one good IPO, and I think investor confidence in the IPO market will come back roaring.
So, you mean most of the IPOs in 2022 fell below their public listing prices?
Well, I think right now they are below their listing prices. At the very least, they're below the all-time highs substantially. Two
companies that were supposed to list in the last quarter have been deferred to the new year. And one of them is the Razon-led Prime Infrastructure Capital. No? And one of them as well is the North Star Meat Merchants. Could this excite the markets?
I think the markets have been looking forward to those IPOs. But naturally, the only reason why these IPOs are deferred is because investor interest is not strong enough. Investors aren't willing to pay a high enough price for the company to sell their shares. So, until the market turns itself around, I don't see that issue sorting itself out, and I don't see the companies getting the price that they want. Now, to me, that's a good thing. You don't want companies desperate for cash coming to market and trying to allure investors. So, we didn't get the IPOs, but to me, we're still in a good place.
We also saw several real estate investment trusts or REITs listing last year. Does it still excite investors?
I think the novelty of the REITs has gone away a little bit. They have been particularly hard hit last year because of interest rates moving up substantially. And with interest rates moving up substantially, you're going to want a higher yield from these REITs. So naturally, price must go down. So, I think this year it will still be a hard sell for investors. But in my view, these are something that investors should be looking at, particularly in the second half of the year when I think REITs will start recovering.
So what kind of themes will investors really get excited about when it comes to new listings?
Well,
Which sectors?
to me, my key sector for this year is the energy sector. Mainly
Renewable
for
energy?
I think traditional energy. It's not the sexiest. It's not something that's top of mind for most investors. But I think they're going to have a very phenomenal year, and that includes coal producers, power generators. I think these are the kinds of companies that people should be putting their money into.
What about existing and already listed companies? Which sectors excite you?
Well, I think for the first half of the year, I'm still looking at retail names. I think most the viewers at home can probably attest to this. But the Filipino consumer is still very strong. Over the holiday season, restaurants, malls, all full. I think earlier today, Philippine Airlines mentioned that they are now flying more flights than pre-pandemic. So the Filipino consumer is still strong. And that's a theme that I think we will keep seeing, at least in the first half of 2022.
But they might have spent everything by December 31st. Won't they start penny pinching at least in the first quarter of 2023?
I think that is a very real possibility. We will see, I think, a reversion to more sustainable spending habits. But I think just the magnitude of what we saw over the last year should give investors a lot of confidence in the strength of the consumer.
All right. Everyone is also talking about the Maharlika Investment Fund. Will this be a boom to the capital markets? Will this excite the stock market?
Well, the Maharlika Fund is quite a nuanced topic because it will ultimately come down to how that fund is managed and what its goals are. I think goals such as bringing down inflation has been floated, right? That the Maharlika Fund will invest in agricultural and energy firms so that they can potentially lower the cost of production. Now, if this is the goal and is how it is conducted, then yes, there's a lot to be excited. But ultimately, I think more guidelines need to come out on whether and how the funds will be invested by Maharlika.
I spoke with the Philippine Stock Exchange President Ramon Monzon last week here on the show, and he said that he supports it. What about you, Will? Do you support the Maharlika Investment Fund becoming a law and people's money being invested in the fund?
Well, Rico, I think if the correct guidelines are in place and that the right managers are chosen and that the correct investment thesis are made, then I do support it. But there is a big asterisk there.
Okay, it still has to be discussed, right, in the Senate. And of course, the Bicameral Conference Committee have to be able to basically put everything together before it becomes a law and signed by President Marcos. What is on your wish list for the Philippine Stock Exchange this year, and what new innovations and services should be introduced?
Well, Rico, I think short selling has been the sort of coming soon product of the PSE for a while now, and I think every year we are inching closer and closer to that coming out. That remains to be the top of my list. But other than that, I do want to see the IPOs coming back, and I want to see greater accessibility to retail investors. Right now, only 1% of Filipinos are invested in the stock market, and brokers like us, we're offering mobile apps and online trading to hopefully increase that participation. But I'd really like to see more industry-wide initiatives to support that push towards retail investing.
But of course, Will, investing in the stock market is not also for the faint-hearted. I mean, watching the market move through gyrations, peaks, valleys, and bottoms. I mean, what advice can you give for the first-time investor? I mean, who's brave enough to get into the stock market?
My advice to first-time investors would be to invest in the companies that you know. I think a common fault of new investors is to invest in the hot stock, the hot topic or the flavor of the month. That to me is not a sustainable way of investing. It often leads to tears. But I think investing in companies that you know, in industries that you're familiar with, and really knowing the fundamentals behind the company will help investors achieve success in the stock market.
And only invest when you have that extra cash.
Of course.
Will Cabangon, thank you so much for your advice and for your insights on the Philippine stock market in 2023.
Thank you, Rico.
Will Cabangon, the president of AAA Southeast Equities.